Hi everyone. Yeah, so I'm sorry. I'm honestly conflicted about telling this story just because I know my neighbor's a good person and she can't help who her son is. But I have to tell it mainly because I want other women to know the type of sneaky shit going on. So yeah, like he and I were walking side by side. Again, this is my neighbor's son. Of course, I want to be nice to him. And then he's like, hold on. Like, it was very obvious that dark orange truck was following us, following me. Like, he was doing it super slow and just literally following me down the street, not trying to be sneaky, which is another thing that tells me this was a setup. Which is another thing that tells me this was a setup to try to save me, because there was no effort whatsoever to be even the slightest bit sneaky. So the neighbor's son is like, hold on for a minute, and then gets to the side of me. Let's say, here's a truck over here on the street. The neighbor gets to the side of me. He switches sides. He's like, hold on a second. He gets on the other side of me, and he's like, you don't know this man? You don't know this truck? It was a setup for me to say something like, why is this truck following me? Which I did. But he's like, you don't know this man? He said that once, and then he's like, that's weird, and at first I bought it. It was believable. I mean, I bought it the whole time until August, obviously. And I was like, no. He's like, well, let me. And I thought he was just being kind and like, taking notice to a creepy man at the time. I bought it. Well, then, a couple different things about that conversation. I told y'all that he was just being really rude. He was like, well, why'd you have to move right next door to my parents, basically? And then he's like, well, my parents will give you the shirt off their back. Now, you got to understand, just like from my internal perspective, at this time in my life, I was going out of my way to not, I had already had multiple stalkers, unfortunately, and I didn't want to be overly confrontational when I didn't have to be. So anyways, he was super rude. He was like, why'd you have to move next to my parents? And then he's like, well, I didn't even know how young you were. That's another thing working against you. What the fuck? Like, he was going out of his way to try to make me feel like I'm not welcome. I had walked him over to the porch of my building. My building had a little porch. And once I got that vibe from him, I was like, all right, well, I'm going to go. I'm going to go take another walk, pretty much. Fuck out of here. And he's like, well, where are you going? Blah, blah, blah. I was like, I'm going to go look at this house that's for sale down the road and see how much is it for sale for. Whatever. And then he's like, so you're sure you didn't know that guy? Okay. Well, then another thing he said before I walked off. Now yes, I didn't put together the whole dark orange truck setup thing. And I didn't put together that this guy was a pimp or trying to pimp me out. The neighbor's son was a pimp and trying to pimp me out. And I didn't put all that together immediately. But the next thing he said it was something I already knew was pimp behavior, which is, or even if I didn't understand it as that, yeah, I knew it was that, but anyways, I knew it was not something I ever wanted to have contact with. He was like, so you're a young single female, defenseless. Are you sure you don't need protection? I already knew that anytime a guy tries to sell you that you need protection or whatever, fuck no. I don't, what the fuck would I need protection from? Fuck out of here. So I was pissed. Like, and then another thing he said, well, that was after I came walking back. Okay, so I went on my walk, I came walking back, and he approached me again, and this time there were other people from the neighborhood out there, and he was like, well, what, how much was the house? Like, how was the house? Like, he was like asking me a bunch of questions. That's another thing with the question asking thing. But anyways, and then, so I obviously didn't know for sure that he was a pimp. I didn't know about the setup, but my instincts helped me, because I was like, oh, is this your piece of property down here? I knew it was. I'm pretty sure it's not his piece of property at all, but whatever. It could be, could not be. I don't think it is. I was like, yeah, because I was going to cut down this tree, because this tree is growing out into the street. But I didn't want to cut it down without asking whoever the property owner was. I knocked on the other neighbor's door the other day trying to figure out if it was their property, because the tree was growing out into the street to the point that it would like scratch your car if you drove past it. It was like thorns. So he's like, yeah, go ahead. So I got my chainsaw out and cut the tree down, and I looked him in the eye. And I wasn't even aware fully why I was doing that at that time. I just knew, fuck this guy, and I wanted to cut the tree down anyways, but it was like, don't you dare fucking ever try to, defenseless. What would I be defenseless from? Protection. What would I need protection from? I'm an independent woman, motherfucker. Like, do not talk to me like that. So I looked him in the eye. He got the fucking message. So, oh yeah, and then he was like, well, I know what I was thinking at the time was, because he was like, oh, my parents, they'll give you the shirt off their back. I wasn't asking them for the shirt off their back. I would have never accepted any money from them or anything like that. She went out of her way to like let me take showers at her house, and I'm very grateful for that, and I always will be. And she can't help that her son was super rude to me and whatever else he's involved in. But he was like, well, don't you need money? Don't you think people should give you donations like for your plight? And I was like, and again, I'm trying not to be overly confrontational, but I already knew, fuck this guy, because he's been super fucking rude to me. I was like, oh, what? So you can say I'm trying to get people to give me the shirt off their back? Or I had some kind of like smart aleck kind of comment like that. Looking back, this guy was a pimp, I think, or trying to, or otherwise under the control of whatever criminal syndicate, and plotting on me. And looking back, that was probably to try to like dangle something in front of my face, like, oh, don't you need money? So I didn't take the bait. So looking back, yeah, like that whole thing was definitely a setup how do I know it was definitely a setup? Well, because that same dark colored orange Jeep truck with the Hispanic male who had driven by me that day back in March, when he said, oh, hold on, and got on the other side of the road to supposedly protect me, right? That was one of the vehicles that I witnessed stalking me during the time that I was in Texas driving around randomly. It wasn't in Stanford that I spotted that vehicle, but it was the exact same vehicle, and it was a Hispanic male, and I was like, yeah, that's definitely... I took note of it. I still didn't understand that whole thing had been a setup, because in my mind, that orange Jeep truck was still just a creepy guy who I knew had followed me one time. Then later, I'm like, yeah, that was a setup, because I did the research, because this is what, I already knew that any guy who tries to tell you need protection, that's pimp talk. But think about it. It's like, how's he actually going to sell me that I need protection? Of course, he makes it just seem like it's chivalrous kind of thing, like, protecting a woman. He didn't say anything sex trafficking related, but it's like, how's he actually going to sell me that I need quote unquote protection by doing some shit like that, and giving some kind of creepy thing. Let's say hypothetically that whole thing wasn't a setup, which I do think it was. Then, you know, why would he say, who would want to know, oh, do you need protection? When he said that, by the way, I was like, no, I got it. Like, very firm on that. No, you know, why else would he say something like that? That is not a normal thing that even a chivalrous type of guy says. So it's sad to realize that that's the reality, but it is. Okay. So I say all that to say, be aware, things that you don't think are related or connected are. You know, this is a small town. Because in my mind, that guy had just been following me from my walk. This is a small town where a lot of people, everybody knows everybody, you know? Even when it's not, be aware of things that appear disconnected. They may very well be connected. I don't feel bad about putting him out there like that, because even if, let's say that wasn't a setup, either way, he was extremely rude to me, trying to make me feel like I don't belong. Either way, it was pimp behavior, because, you know, trying to make you feel like you don't belong is a ploy to try to get that person to be your source of belonging, right? It was not a normal, like, slip of the tongue rude thing that normal people would say. It was clearly some sort of intention behind it, because it wasn't just one thing he said, it was multiple things. So, let's see here. Where was I? Okay, yeah, so, either that first or second night in Salt Lake City, that first time, I went outside of the building at nighttime and took a little walk to see what was going on. I wasn't followed on my walk, so that was good. That told me that they didn't have enough people in Salt Lake yet to follow me to that extent, so that was great. But then when I went and sat outside the building and like smoked a black and mild and just observed, and I was probably sitting out there for like 20 minutes, and I saw a car drive by, no license plate at all, and it was full of people. So at that point I'm like, oh, okay, well, first of all, that was the first time the whole no license plate thing happened. That's very important. That'll come up later. Second of all, I was like, okay, I can't hesitate. You know, remember, I had just been followed by those 3 Hispanic guys on the plane. And I was like, I can't hesitate. Like, I have to... call the police when something illegal happens. So, you know, even if it's not related to this, which I knew it probably was, or it could be, I wasn't sure. I was like, I'm going to call the police because it just happened. So that gives me the chance that they might get caught, right? Like, unlike a lot of this stuff where it's like, I don't put it together until later. This just happened, and this is definitely illegal to ride around with no license plate. So, you know, I called the police. I said, hey, like, car full of people, gave the description, no license plate. That's all I said. And, they said they were going to go check it out. I told them, like, you know, what direction they were driving on and everything. I called back probably 20 minutes later and like asked, and they said they weren't able to find the vehicle. Okay. So then, unfortunately, oh yeah, the other important part of that trip is that I, at that point, after trying to give my statement to multiple authorities, something I heard a lot was, do you have video or do you have a picture of this guy Gil? And I didn't. And so I was like, okay, I don't have anything to identify this person by except for a name that I think is probably fake and the family he told me he was born into. So I like unblocked his number really quick, called him, you know, I said, stop stalking me and raping me, stop stalking me, you know, and I was like trying to like, I was just saying some shit to like try to make him feel bad, whatever. what I said is not really important. It was really short. But the main reason I did that was to record his voice, so I at least had that to identify him by, since I didn't have a picture of him. And I did get his voice on recording. That's the only other time I ever talked to him, and it was just to have something to identify him by. I still have that recording. Then, okay, yeah, so, I recorded his voice and then reblocked his number after talking to him for maybe a minute and a half. Probably not even, maybe, yeah, so whatever. Super short conversation. My mom believed me, but she didn't understand the urgency. She didn't, I was like, we need to get an alarm system here, and she didn't want to, unfortunately, just issues. And then plus I knew I had been followed here, so I was like, well, maybe this is my chance to get away, because I figured out that they didn't really know my mom's building like that. So I was like, okay, maybe this is my chance to get away. And I got an Uber to test it out. I took an Uber like 45 minutes away and turned back around. Nobody followed us during that Uber ride. So I was like, okay, like, this is my chance to get the fuck away from these people. So then the next day, after I had like taken that random Uber, I'm like, okay, this is my chance. So I get another Uber and I just go straight to the airport. There was a flight from Salt Lake City to Charlotte, like within an hour and a half. So like, this is my chance, let's go. And did that. Showed up at the airport and went to the counter to buy my ticket, and they're like, no, we can't sell you the ticket, it's too short. And I knew they could if they wanted to. I was like, no, please, like, and honestly, I was at a point, you got to understand, at this point, it was like probably May 4th or something. I'll have to look at the dates exactly. I had been extremely calm throughout all this. I hadn't cried. I hadn't lost my shit at all. Like, I think most people probably would have if they had been through this. I had been extremely, extremely calm and observant. I'm not trying to toot my own horn, y'all. It's just like, it's a fact. I knew I already knew, let's be real, I already knew if I displayed any human emotion, it was going to be used against me. To try to paint me out to be crazy. I already knew that anyways, but especially after the Corsicana officer made that comment. Yeah. So, but at that point, I'm like, please, you don't understand, this is my chance. Because I knew I hadn't been followed to the airport. I could tell I had not been followed. Obviously there's other people out in public, but at this point, I've gotten good at being able to tell. And I could tell I had not been followed. I was like, please, you've got to let me go. Like, you've got to let me buy the ticket. Because they still had more tickets. I knew they did because it was online available. And they were like, no. Like, the more I pushed, they were like, no. And that's a whole thing. That guy, I might go into that some other time later. Like, I got to the point where I was like, I opened up to these people and told them, I cried and I told them what was going on. I was like, please, you've got to let me use this one chance I've got to get away. This has been, at this point, this had already been 2 weeks of being stalked nonstop. And whatever, long story short, they didn't let me. And I ended up telling that guy at the front desk everything. I needed help, and I knew I needed help. So let's just say let's just say that I learned from that interaction. There's a whole lot more to that interaction. I don't know if I'll go into it now. I won't go into it now. I learned from that interaction, okay, I need to really like when I tell people what's going on, like, this network is huge. And I'm like, when I tell people what's going on, you know, I believe most people are good, but then again, this is hugely connected. And when people hear that, even though I told them that I had been straight up raped and stalked, when people hear that, they might become predatory. So I learned that I had to be really fucking careful about who I told this to in person, which sucks because it's like, you know, I can't do this alone. I need help. I need to be able to reach out for help. But unfortunately, it wasn't working that way. Anyway, so I'm gonna take a pause here.